Harine. So, to briefly recapitulate, we had begun the Yoga Sutras proper, that is, after the elaborate introduction which Swami Vivekananda gave, because he knew yoga was, in those days, I mean, when he visited, it used to be rather a mysterious discipline or a mysterious thing, yoga. People very often uh, did not realize that this idea of yoga, the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, I mean, they were shrouded in some sort of mystery. So there was a lot of mystery mongering and so many various interpretations of yoga by the few people who used to talk about it or maybe even practice, though it is credited to Swami Vivekananda that he first took the real authentic yoga to the West, as it should be understood, not as it is practiced even today. So, the idea of yoga, people have fantastic ideas. We all know how International Yoga Day has been declared. June 21st, we all celebrate. And we know what we celebrate. Actually, we are celebrating only the asana part, which seems to be very popular because that is what is normally people seek, to have a balanced or maybe a harmonious physical life, and along with that, a little bit of uh, mental harmony. That's all people seek: good health and a little bit of calming down of the mind. If yoga can facilitate that, they are fine. They don't expect anything higher than that. So, Swami Vivekananda, you may say safely, when Raj Yoga was first published in 1896 in London. Actually, the first edition is the London edition, then it was published simultaneously in New York as well. But the London edition was the first authentic discussion on the subject of Patanjali's yoga. But Swami Vivekananda, as I mentioned repeatedly, he gave a very elaborate introduction in which he doesn't stick to Patanjali's yoga. This point you have to remember. He combines all just as his master did. If you read the great master, you will find he synthesized so many systems of spiritual practice in his own life. So, following his master, following his footsteps, Swami Vivekananda introduced several elements into Patanjali's yoga. That point should be remembered. That is clear only if we read the introduction, the elaborate introduction which Swami Vivekananda wrote, because this is the only text, this is the only book he wrote actually for the Western, especially for the Western uh, devotees or Western audience. So, because all his other things are recorded, Gyan Yoga, Karma Yoga, all the other yoga books, three yogas, they are recorded lectures which were compiled in book form. Whereas this was written, dictated by him. Miss Alan Waldo took down the notes and used to meditate, as I said, for days together, sometimes hours and days together, before he could comment on some of the sutras of Patanjali. But anyway, if you find the elaborate introduction discusses, among other things, essentials of Patanjali's yoga and adds some Upanishadic ideas, like the idea of prana, which was uh, taken directly from the Upanishads. Though prana is there as part of the technique known as pranayama, but it restricts, I mean, it is restricted to breathing, some breathing techniques which are known as pranayama. But Swamiji gave pranayama very elaborate treatment in his introduction, where he describes prana is the the force that maintains our body, all the five pranas, and then what it really means, how is it, what is the connection between individual prana and the cosmic prana. So there are many things he has discussed in the introduction, and we have discussed that very systematically. Even while discussing the sutras, as you will see now, he will introduce certain things which have come from other traditions, like the Tantras, the Bija, the Shakti, idea of Shiva and Shakti, or Purusha and Prakriti, which is obviously Sankhya concept adapted by yoga. So Purusha and Prakriti they understand, but to combine it with the idea of Shiva and Shakti, especially the Kundalini idea, which is not part of Patanjali. Let me repeat again and again. Most of the yoga teachers now, they will talk about this Kundalini as if it is something uh, very natural to the philosophy of yoga. Yoga does not speak of Kundalini. There is no reference anywhere in either Patanjali's Yoga Sutras or the commentaries that were written, especially the older commentaries. Later commentaries might have introduced this concept, but the original two commentaries, Vyasa and Bhoja, who wrote a Vritti, these were the two extant commentaries which Swami Vivekananda studied. In fact, when he wanted to write a book on Raj Yoga, that is Patanjali's Yoga, he asked for Bhoja Vritti, which was not available in Devanagari. Devanagari is the popular Sanskrit script. So he found one copy in Tamil, a translation of that or a book in Tamil characters. You can imagine how keen he was to read that Bhojavritti. He wanted to know what did the original two commentators comment. That is, Vyasa was the main commentator. His commentary is very well known on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And there is another commentary by Bhoja, which was available but only in Tamil script. Though it is Sanskrit, but it was available in Tamil script. So he studied, he had that book brought to him, and then he studied it by juxtaposing the characters, Tamil and Sanskrit, Devanagari, and then he tried to read that. So you can understand how much preparation. He was very keen to leave behind a very scholarly work on this very important subject of yoga, Patanjali's yoga. So the second sutra, he is giving his own commentary, and I'll just run through that because the next sutra, understanding of the next sutra will totally depend on the understanding of this sutra. So the second sutra, after the first sutra, which is Yoga Anushasanam, means anticipating that the person who wants to follow this Patanjali's yoga has some qualification, has some basic qualification. He is a adhikari. In Vedanta also, you need a person to have some basic qualification without which Vedanta also will not be taught by any teacher. That's the tradition. So Atha, whenever Atha, all the Brahma Sutras and all sutras, they begin with Atha, now. Now means what? It is explained, Yoganuशासनम. So we will now start the discipline of yoga. That is the idea. So Atha means now, means after a certain preparation, mental preparation, or certain stage of life where you are prepared to take this yoga, Patanjali's yoga, seriously as a sadhana, not as a just out of curiosity, then the next sutras, following sutras, become relevant. The second sutra is the main headline, or you may say the main theme of the entire Patanjali's yoga. As I said, yoga, the only definition of yoga, Patanjali's yoga, is chitta vritti nirodha. So the whole idea behind Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, all the subsequent Yoga Sutras depend on this central sutra, is the Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So we spent a lot of time discussing what Chitta is, mental stuff, mind stuff, as Swami Vivekananda so nicely translated it into English. And Vritti means the thoughts, the waves in that mind stuff, which are popularly known as thoughts. So they are vrittis, chitta vritti, nirodha, to control them. Why do we control them? Why do we need to control them? So he says it prevents the mind stuff, the chitta, from taking various forms, different forms. And there is a tendency of the Purusha, the individual soul, to identify himself with all these vrittis, that is, the different forms it takes. So you have a vritti which makes you sad, then you say, I am sad. There is a vritti which makes you happy, and then you just refer to yourself as a happy person. So the self identification is connected to your vrittis, not your real self, not to the real Purusha. So Prakriti has a big role to play. We discussed what Prakriti was, so we don't will not repeat. So the vrittis which form part of the Prakriti or all the other things, they all form part of the Prakriti, colors the self identity of the Purusha. It thinks I am a sad person, I am a fat person, I am a thin person. So all these upadhis, the which Advaita Vedanta calls upadhis, they are these result of these vrittis. So why do you have to control the vrittis? It is because you can realize your real self, what you really are. If you want to understand, that is the goal of yoga. You have to restrain all the vrittis, chitta vritti nirodha. So Swamiji himself says a good deal of explanation is necessary. It's just not enough to say, because the many questions have to be answered. One is, why should we retrain the mind thoughts? The thinking is a natural process, and we are proud that as human beings we can think. We can think complicated things, we can analyze, we have the power of cognition, we have the power of emotion, power of will to do what we think and to plan things ahead of many things. We can anticipate, we can plan. So that is a great advantage human beings have over animals and other species. So what will happen if we restrain these thoughts? That is the question. And that is the fundamental question that needs to be answered. Because if I restrain, unless I tell you what is the benefit you will get by restraining thoughts, why not have more and more thoughts? Naturally, a person with a scientific attitude will say, what is wrong? We have been built in this way. Our personality is built in such a way that we thinking is a great faculty. So that is why some of the Western philosophers, they say, I think that therefore I am. I think Descartes, Rene Descartes, Descartes said that I think therefore I am. That means because I think, I owe my existence to my thinking. Whereas Patanjali is exactly opposite. You think, and because of your thoughts, you see or you interpret yourself. Your self identity gets colored by your thoughts. So, if you want to know your real self, you have to stop thinking. It is a very difficult thing to understand, but that is what uh, this Patanjali second sutra says. If we want that kind of yoga, if we want Chitta Vritti Nirodha, then we will discuss the next steps. Otherwise, it's makes sense to stop the study of Raj Yoga, Patanjali's yoga at this stage alone. He gives the purpose and goal of Raj Yoga or Patanjali's yoga. He says yoga is defined yoga as Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So, do you want to stop these vrittis? What you will gain if you do this Chitta Vritti Nirodha, or stop the Chitta Vrittis, that he will explain later. What happens if you don't stop these vrittis? That also he'll explain in the next sutra. But before that, Swami Vivekananda says, we have to first know how these thoughts arise. So it's worth repeating. That's why I'm just discussing very quickly. He says, to understand vrittis, you have to understand how thinking vrittis arise. If we know how they arise, then we can control it. If you don't know its source, how the vrittis arise, how it impacts our life, how it impacts our personality, then how you just can't say control the chitta vrittis. So you are not uh, clear as to first how to control the vrittis, because you don't know how the vrittis arise. So you have to do a little bit of you should have a little bit of understanding how the vrittis arise. So he says, I have eyes. Swamiji starts in a very simple step by step method. He shows what is the importance of these vrittis, how do they arise, and how do I stop them. So first is, I have eyes. He says, eyes do not see, because the if the brain center which is in the head, that is the brain, eyes will be there, the retina, everything will be there. The person will also the light will pass through, and there is a pictures of the objects will fall on the retina, and then yes, but still the eyes will not see, because the brain center is needed, the subtle center in the brain, to not only see but make sense of what he sees. So the eyes are only a secondary instrument. So that is the first thing is establishing. Not it's not the organ of vision as we normally think. In a gross way, yes, eyes, you see through the eyes. But who really sees? The subtle brain center which interprets that vision. Now, even one, say one, and even two eyes, Swamiji says, are not enough if there are people who sleep with their eyes open. We see it very often. Eyes are, light is falling, everything they are seeing, but their brain center is almost shut off because it is they are in deep sleep. So naturally, when they are in deep sleep, the eyes, the retina, and the objects reflection is there on the retina, but they are not seeing. Light is there, the picture is there, but a third thing is necessary. The mind should be joined to the organ, whichever organ, eyes, ears, and all the other sense organs. If the brain center is not joined, that means somehow what we know, popularly know as the mind, should be attached to that. So that is why in some systems of philosophy, mind itself is the 11th organ. Though we say there are 10 organs of senses, five karmendriyas, five gyanendriyas, and in some philosophies they say 11th is the mind, because without the mind, in spite of all the five senses, 10 senses functioning, there is no knowledge. So we need a 11th sense, which is in a way correct, because take away the brain centers, then all the sense organs, though they may be giving inputs to the brain, if the brain does not react or interpret, then it's of no use. So we need the agency of the brain center, and also that is the agency of the mind. So that is what how Swamiji goes. So now what happens? He says this constant reaction, I mean, the senses sending all the inputs to the brain and the brain interpreting them and reacting, sometimes reacting, otherwise just observing. They are sent, according to Patanjali's yoga, they are sent to the self, or that is Purusha. It is the Purusha or the inner self or the awareness which is unchanging within us. That self or that Purusha, it is known as Purusha in Patanjali, or you may call it Atman or Jivatman in Vedanta. But that is how perception takes place. This brain center makes sense of the different inputs by the different centers. Sometimes they are simultaneously. You hear, see, audio, visual, you see, you touch. So there may be many inputs, but still the brain centers, respective brain centers, uh, give you a very coherent picture. So you that gives some impression which is presented before the Purusha. So in this is how perception takes place. And where do they take place? For that, you have to understand the idea of mind, where the word chitta is referred here. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So, is chitta something different from the mind? Swamiji has translated it as mind stuff. To distinguish it from the mind, the faculty known as manas, we have chitta. So, there is something known as manas, the reactive mind. There is something known as chitta, which is the mind stuff. So this mind stuff, which is chitta, which again I have discussed earlier, it comprises of all our old thoughts, memories, smritis. So chitta is a very complex thing. But anyway, the vrittis arise in the chitta. That is enough at this stage to understand. And then he says, what is thought? If vrittis arise in the chitta, what is thought? Thought is according to Swamiji, it is just another force like gravitation. We have so many forces, and he discussed this elaborately in the introduction to Raj Yoga. Very in great detail, he has described. He says there are so many forces. He says Akasha and Prana. He's taken this idea from the Upanishads. Akasha is the primal matter, and Prana is the force. So, the infinite storehouse of force in the cosmos is known as prana. He has generalized the idea of prana. He's taken this from the Upanishad. And he says the instrument called chitta, our mind stuff, takes some prana. That is why in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, yoga, pranayama is also important. It's not just breathing. Breathing is just one part of the entire cosmic force known as prana, both at the cosmic level and the individual level. At the cosmic level, it is universal prana. In the individual level, it is individual prana. And that also further, for convenience, has been divided into five: prana, apana, samana, vyana. We have discussed that. So, the infinite storehouse of force is there. Thought is also one of them. But how is thought generated? So these pranas, the universal force, impacts the chitta. Chitta is the mind stuff, as I said. Like a lake, you drop a stone, it creates whirlpools. In a placid lake where there are no waves, you can see the bottom very clearly. So, this inputs that we get through our senses, which the mind also coordinates, that creates vrittis in the world. Vrittis literally means whirlpools. So, if you drop a stone in a lake, you get concentric whirlpools. So, every time our mind stuff, which can be compared to a lake, Swamiji does that, you drop stones. Dropping stones means getting inputs through the eyes, through the ears, through the smell, nose, smell. We are constantly getting input, constantly whirlpools are being created. They are known as vrittis. So, chitta vritti, we have understood now what it means. Nirodha means to stop. Now, the goal of yoga, the only goal of yoga, there may be secondary goals like pranayama may help you uh, improve your health. That is what people are interested. But those are the third and fourth steps of yoga. They are nowhere near the ultimate goal of yoga. So asana will help you. Asanas will help you not only to study the body and study the mind, to make the mind steady, which is the goal of yoga. Because second sutra, as I said, is the fundamental sutra of the entire Patanjali's yoga. Chitta vritti nirodha, you do it through asana, you do it through pranayama, you do it through all the subsequent steps, pratyahara, which we are discussing, which we will discuss later. All these things are meant only for chitta vritti nirodha. The second sutra says yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So again coming back to, we have understood what vritti is, it's force. So from the infinite storehouse of nature, of force that is available in nature, like magnetic force, gravitational force, pranic force, that is our prana, the systems, the force that runs our body. Breathing is one of them. The digestion, they have been classified into different forces. The heat that is produced in the body, that is also a force. So this force, Swamiji says, Patanjali's commentators also say, this Yoga Sutras commentators, they say, where does this force come from? We just don't absorb it directly, though we can absorb it. Like, for example, when you go out in the sun, they say vitamin D is synthesized. There are so many processes happening. Some energy is directly absorbed. But most of our prana is generated through food. That is why they give so much in Taittiriya Upanishad when they discuss the different koshas, Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha. So food is very important. So the food now here, the commentators interpret in different ways. Food is not the physical food that you take. That's not the only food you take. What you take in through your eyes also is food. What you take in through ears. That's why you see, if somebody says something, it impacts your digestion, it creates anxieties. You have just taken food through the ears. So in that sense, food should be understood. And with that food, it gives you prana. Obviously, the physical food that we take gives you power of motion, the muscle strength, and all those things, nutrition, because that is also a prana. Circulation, ingestion, and digestion. and then assimilation of the food. That is also one of the pranas. And then the nervous energy. Nervous energy uh, can become weak if you don't take proper food. So you need the nerves to be strong to convey different the nervous energy, if it has to flow through the entire body and to the brain, and then your responses will be sharp. So you see, directly or indirectly, they depend on the food input, mainly physical food, but there are other food, the social media that you watch. So many things can impact your body and mind and the vrittis. So mind appears to be, but this chitta or mind stuff, we know that it is because of the vrittis which are projected as thought. So when you make sense of this universe through all the sensory inputs, you react to it in a particular way, that is manas, another part of the mind other than chitta, manas, buddhi. We'll come to that later. All these different aspects of the mind give your idea of universe. Not it does not enable you to understand what Purusha is, but it enables you, it shows you, it gives you some sort of self identity in this whole universe, the whole cosmic, uh, in the whole universe, your Jivatma or your personality has a place. So it will, the vrittis will decide what you really are. So that's why Buddha gave so much importance to this. He said, as you think, so you become. I mean, your thoughts are made. In fact, they don't, Buddhists, if you go follow Buddhist philosophy, they say there is no need for a Purusha or a soul. There is no soul. That is why sometimes they call it Anatma. It is just a semblance. You see, all the thoughts make you what you are. And to get rid of that, to get rid of the thoughts, or in Patanjali's yoga, it is Chitta Vritti Nirodha, stop the thoughts. That is why many times, people accuse Patanjali of copying from Buddhism and the other way around. They say Patanjali's yoga is much more ancient than Buddhism. So the Buddhists took these ideas from yoga, and whatever may be uh, the historical evidence behind this, the idea is both are based on the same principle. One says the Purusha watches this, the other says there's no need for any self. If you see Buddhists, they say it is just a play of thoughts. As you think, so you become. If your thoughts are good, you consider yourself to be a good man. The world considers you to be a good man. If your thoughts are bad, actions, then bad thoughts give rise to bad actions. So, according to them, you are what you think. In a way, it is true. For practical purposes, as you think, so you become. Our thoughts have determined or decided what we are, what we will be in future, and what we were in the past. So that's why this study of vrittis, chitta vritti nirodha, the first he says the goal is to stop the vrittis, but it is not so easy. So the next sutras they will say, and in the next sutras Patanjali will discuss what are the different types of vrittis. It is easy to say just control the vrittis, but it is the most difficult thing in this universe. Even Buddhism says that. He says to reach a state where if you want to reach nirvana, you have to completely stop the vrittis. Just keep the awareness, the bodhi, they call it bodhi, the pure awareness, and just observe the thoughts so that they slowly disappear. And you just, they also call it as mindfulness meditation. You are mindful of what? Anything. It doesn't matter what you are mindful of. They say you have to undo all these things. It is the thinking that, good or bad thinking, that taints your personality, which is pure, which can take you to nirvana. But if you control your thoughts, think rightly, act rightly, that's how Buddhism adapted this yoga and made it a very simple philosophy. So anyway, the book, Swamiji says what the inputs are. There are objects outside, and the mind gives out a reaction. And that reaction, he just compares it to a stone. If there is no motion in the water, the surface is very clear. But the moment you drop a stone, big stone, whirlpools are created, and different forms. The thought waves create a different universe for you. So, Swami Vivekananda also quotes one Western philosopher who comes very close to what Patanjali says, John Stuart Mill. So he says matter is a permanent, what you see, the world that you see outside is a permanent possibility of sensations. So sensations give certain ideas. You see, for example, if a person is color blind, he sees a different color. So everybody sees the universe in a unique way. A blind person may not see anything, but he has his idea of the universe. So, what you call matter for a blind man, for a color blind man, for animals, for bats, they have different frequencies they can see in the night. So, depending on the sensations. So, he says the world outside is a permanent possibility of the sensations within the mind. That's why Patanjali gives so much importance to this Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Now, uh, it is difficult to understand it. So, Swamiji gives another beautiful example, like his guru, Sri Ramakrishna, used to give simple parables. So, he says, he gives the example of a pearl. It's such a wonderful idea. He says, do you know how pearls are made? Oysters are the creatures who make these pearls. So it says, take an oyster, for example. This is important to understand what is the importance of vrittis in our life. We create our own universe, good or bad. To put this idea in our mind, Swamiji is giving so many examples which make it very clear. He says, take an oyster, for example. And he says, you know how pearls are made. Pearls are so beautiful, they are used as jewelry, but we do not know how they are made. He says, a parasite sometimes gets inside the shell, and the oyster, it causes irritation. The oyster throws out some kind of enamel. So it's a parasite, something which is despised, which accidentally enters the shell, and then the pearl throws a coating around it to prevent it from doing damage, and some enamel, and when it solidifies, it becomes a pearl. So if you take a pearl, the source is some kind of parasite which has accidentally entered the shell, and that is how pearls are made. So Swamiji says the universe of our experience is our own enamel. So to say, the real universe is the parasite which is serving as the nucleus. So the parasite has entered us, we have thrown an enamel, and we have created our own pearls, which has nothing to do with the parasite. It was just, he says, ordinary person who is not a yogi will not understand. He just sees the enamel. He just sees the reaction. He just sees the reaction his mind throws out. And that is why he says, if my reaction is bad on some day or sorrowful, I'll say I am very sorrowful. But you are the same person. The self has not changed. What has changed is your reaction. So in the chitta, there are these vrittis because of external impressions, like a parasite coming into the pearl oyster's shell, and the oyster is throwing out some chemical or some secretion which surrounds that parasite, and then when it solidifies, it becomes a pearl. So you create different pearls of different size, and now Swamiji says you will be in an idea to understand what these vrittis mean, because the mind is just an instrument in a person, the Purusha. Purusha is playing out all the things that a man normally does, interprets the universe, likes certain things, dislikes certain things. So these vrittis are of various kinds. Our vrittis will decide how we look at the world. So that makes thinking so important. As Buddha says, as you think, so you become. If you constantly think that you are happy, you will be happy. If you constantly think you are evil or you are sad or you are a sinner, you will become that. So the real man is behind the mind. The mind is the instrument in the hand, and it is the intelligence that is percolating through the mind. So, only because of the presence of Purusha, that is a uniquely Vedantic and yogic idea, that when you go from the sense organs to the mind, the reactive mind, then there is a stage where the mind is refined. And to see that, to see the real nature of Purusha, you need that buddhi. So, this buddhi is a faculty of our entire mind. One part, as I said, is chitta, which is like the water. And another part is the manas, which is the reaction because of vrittis. So you don't see clearly what is at the bottom. The lake, if it is placid, you can, I mean, it is calm, then you can see the bottom. But once the vrittis come, you get a distorted image of reality. So, this reactive mind, if you have to see through that reactive mind, first the vrittis have to be stopped. So, that in brief, Swamiji says, since the vrittis are our universe, and our good vrittis will create a good universe, we are very happy. But it does not, unfortunately, we don't stay that way all the time. Bad vrittis will come because of our past actions, because of the surroundings, because of the sense inputs that you give, because of your reactions. So this whole lake is so much disturbed by this constant throwing of stones that so many vrittis get mixed up, and then you see muddled water. The water which should have been very clear, where you could have seen the bottom, the surface is covered with ripples. So it is possible for us to catch a glimpse of the bottom, that is the real bottom, when the ripples have subsided. So it is clear, very clear, Swamiji says, why this Chitta Vritti Nirodha should be done. So this is a brief explanation. So he compares this bottom of the lake as our own real self, which is our real self. But unfortunately, the waves are distorting the bottom of the surface, and the mind, which is so distorted, I mean, the mind is distorted, but Patanjali classifies it so beautifully. He says uh, there are these three states of distortion. Some distortions are good, some distortions are bad, and some are so called neutral. So the three distortions brings to us a wonderful concept in Sankhya or yoga, which is known as gunas: sattva, rajas, and tamas. So the mind, the three different states of the mind, so also the three different states of the body, so also the three different states of the universe. Patanjali and the Sankhya philosophers have classified into three distinct states: sattva, rajas, and tamas. So the mind, if it is in a very dark state of ignorance, it is not seeing anything. I mean, it is, even if it is seeing in a very hazy way. So it is Swamiji says it will normally found in brutes and idiots who completely see a distorted, or mad people who see a totally distorted universe. The universe doesn't make any sense to them. There's no harmony in their life. So, and they have a tendency to injure, or people who out of ignorance keep on doing violent acts, terrorists, and all those people. They are in a state of tamas. Because no idea comes, their mind is so clouded that they don't even listen to what the inputs are, what the brain centers are telling them. Or in Indian terminology, we say he is without buddhi, means he doesn't have the power of discrimination. His mind is so reactive like animals that he doesn't think. So brutes, idiots, animals, they live in a predominantly in a state which is known as tamas. So tamas is the lowest state of the mind, according to yoga. They are also, we are discussing in fact this theme in great detail. If you see the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, you will find such a wonderful discussion on these three gunas. Gunatraya Vibhaga yoga, Nama Yoga. Means he calls, Sri Krishna says, the whole personality is how it is controlled by these three forces: dark force, tamas, the middle one, rajas, and sattva. So we are a combination of these three. Not that we are fully tamasic or fully rajasic or fully sattvic. So one of the forces, and the mind always lives in these three states or a combination of these three states. So mind is always on in these three states. One is known as tamas. Then there is an active state of mind whose chief motives are power and enjoyment. So when you see a person who is not lazy, who is not destructive, who is not full of ignorance, he has much better intelligence than the tamasic person. But his motives, he is very active. All his thoughts and they make him very dynamic. And his idea is first to become powerful and then rule over others. So the king, that is why the word Rajasic has come. Raja, from Raja is one who rules. So it's like the desire to dominate over others, desire to create things is known as Rajasic. And mostly the motive is enjoyment. I want to enjoy which others and others should not be able to enjoy. I want the privilege for myself. That is what uh, dictatorship or kings believe in. He is supposed to be a special person. So when you say Rajasic, he is obviously uh, very keen that he dominates, he has the power and power to mostly normally to enjoy. Then there is a state, the third state of the mind. And as I said, there will always be a mixture of these three states. Maybe in the same person in the morning, he may be sattvic, but as days pass or as the day uh, advances, he may become rajasic. And maybe at a certain stage, he may become tamasic. So it's not that a person is 100% tamasic, it's a permutation and combination. So when there is the mental state is very calm, I mean, that when your mind feels calm, there's no desire to exert your power over anybody, or when it is not rajasic, or when it is not dull, or when it is not destructive, then it is in a state of sattva or calmness, serenity, in which, in this case, it comes very near to chitta vritti nirodha. The waves will stop. So that is why meditation or yoga means just stop the waves. So go from tamas to rajas, the mind will create a lot of ripples, but when the ripples finally subside, see the difference is the vrittis are totally stopped, but the mind is active. The difference between tamas and rajas, tamas and sattva is that the mind is calm in both the cases, but in one case, in tamas, it is calm, but it is totally incapable of uh, internal activity, or it is not intense. So they look similar because even a tamasic person, when he becomes very inert, he will not act. So one should not mistake that for a sattvic state. Sattvic state is he has the capacity to act, he has the capacity to exert his power, but he controls it. He's intensely capable of activity, but he stops it because he knows he doesn't want to, he wants to rise above rajas and become sattvic. So he says, and Swamiji makes a very beautiful remark here. He gives the example of a horse or a horse carriage, rather. So he says a tamasic person is like the charioteer who just lets go the horse. He's so lazy to even control it. So he just lets go. He is inactive. But then he will depend on the mercy of the horses and the path the carriage takes. He may perhaps there will be an accident. The second Rajasic person is one who controls. He says, no, I will decide where the horses will go. So what he does is he controls the horses. He uses some power. But still he gets diverted. Whereas the Sattvic person, again, holds the rein so tightly, his sense organs, he controls so much that the Carriage runs on the fixed path, very steady, in a very steady and calm manner. Rajasic person may have a lot of diversions in between. So, who can stop these plunging horses? He is a sattvic person. He can stop it. He can stop the whole carriage with his strength. But it is out of strength. Not like just letting go. Let the horse go wherever it wants. So, which requires greater strength? The calm man is surely not the man who is dull. He has risen above activity. He has already become Rajasic. Maybe he had enough experience of Rajas in this life or the previous life. And he has come to a state where he feels it makes sense to just remain calm, not out of weakness, but out of strength. So that is why Swamiji is making this distinction. Don't mistake one for the other. One person is calm because he is dull, another person is calm in spite of being strong. So he said, you must not mistake sattva for dullness or laziness. And who is this calm man? He is the one who can do chitta vritti nirodha. So he says it takes tremendous strength to stop the waves. A very intensely active mind to stop it and meditate requires more strength than just letting go and just sleeping. A dull man, a person who doesn't think or doesn't have the capacity to think, also there is no chitta vritti in his mind. But he is tamasic. Whereas the other person has the capacity to think intensely, powerfully, think powerful thoughts, but at the same time is voluntarily or willingly trying to control that so that he can generate more power. So, activity, according to Swamiji, is a manifestation of inferior strength, according to yoga. And calmness, which comes out of controlling this uh, intense energy dissipating activity. It dissipates energy. Too much of activity of the mind makes the mind, uh, it loses a lot of energy. So it is a calm and collected mind who can be more efficient. So they say anything done through a sattvic mind produces the best result. But he says there is a problem here. It's easy as a theory. We know what sattva, rajas, and tamas are. But the problem with the chitta, as I said, is mind stuff. It makes its contents are mostly past memories, samskaras, the inherent tendencies of our past actions, which may not always be good. They may be good, it's fine. They may be bad, they may be rajasic, they may be tamasic, we do not know. But that chitta, the problem with the mind is the chitta has a tendency like water. You can't keep water at a higher level. It will always go to the lowest level. It will find its level. No matter how much you pump it above, if there is a slope, it will again go back. So this is known as uh, chitta always. We are born with a particular chitta. Every person is born. So the natural tendency, unless you do sadhana, unless you do yoga to take the chitta to a higher level, it will again try to get back to its natural state. But what will happen is the organs, the sense organs, will draw it out. It wants to stay in a very calm state. Normally, that is the tendency of the chitta. Everybody thinks that, oh, I will not be disturbed now. I just want my space. I just want to be left to myself. But somehow somebody will come and draw you out. So, similarly, the uh, senses, the sense objects, when we interact, that is why they say yogi normally prefers to go into solitude. First, he says, let me create, I have to deal with the chitta, which is already turbulent. So, why add more turbulence and then try to control that mind? So, one of the primary requirements of Raj Yoga is silence or solitude. So, the since the tendency of the sense organs, we discussed this in yesterday's retreat in Leicester, where Kathopanishad, there is a beautiful verse. He says the God has cheated us literally by the antaryami, the one who is seated within, has literally, as it were, cheated us by making the senses go outward. because senses can only take us outward, and that is why we suffer. Then what is the answer in the second part of the verse? He says, Kaschit Dhira, some brave person, some wise person says, enough is enough. I don't want these vrittis. I just want to go back and try to see the self within, which is of the nature of spirit, pure consciousness, the Purusha. So he doesn't want. So to restrain this outward tendency, the second sutra says yoga chitta vritti nirodha. That's the only reason, because we want to stop this turbulence and to start it on the return journey through the aid of buddhi, which is another faculty of the mind. Mind you, all these are parts of the mind. Chitta is also the mind, vritti is also the mind, and trying to control the buddhi is also the mind. So, in the first step of yoga, is that this chitta, which will follow its natural tendency, has to be put on a proper course. The chitta is in every animal, Swamiji says. This is, of course, his free rendering of the Vyasa's commentary and Bhoja Vritti. He has, of course, there are some original ideas of Swamiji also. So he says, in the lower animals, this chitta is there, the manas is there, vrittis are also there. But what the animal doesn't have is buddhi, a higher faculty of the mind, which we find as, which is popularly translated as intellect, not the intellect as we know in the West, which is thinking in a very analytical way. No, not that way. Of course, analysis is required. We have to have discrimination. So, Buddhi decides what will make me restless, what will not make me restless, what will make me happy, what will not make me happy. So, this capacity to make the right choices at the right time, that can be, that is one of the explanations or interpretations of this faculty of the mind, that is buddhi. What does buddhi do? It does discrimination. It doesn't just, like manas, be totally reactive. If I start reacting to every action that I'm exposed to, then I will have a miserable life. I'll be quarreling with everyone. But the buddhi tells there's no sense in now. Just put a break now. You just don't react to everything. Otherwise, you'll make yourself miserable. Vrittis will be difficult to control. So Buddhi is the only one which tells you when to stop, when to uh, react, when not to react, how to react. All these things is what is known as, popularly known as, wisdom. So he says the goal of yoga is to raise the mind, to raise the chitta, vrittis of the chitta. By controlling them, you clearly uh, see the bottom, that is, you see your real nature, and that is possible only by uh, activating what is known as a higher faculty of mind, which is buddhi. So Swamiji so nicely says, until the whole chitta takes the form of intellect. What Buddha says bodhi or buddhi, in Vedanta it is buddhi. Buddhi means the light of knowledge, which is the reflection of the pure consciousness within. If we want to see ourselves as we are, then we need buddhi. We want that searchlight. Right now, we are using that searchlight to analyze the mind and the objects outside and decide what to do, what not to do. But at a certain stage, the buddhi has a capacity to turn its face and focus it within. That is why when we meditate, we always say, meditate within, not outside. We can of course see certain objects or our Ishta, God outside, and meditate on him and pray to him. That is a lower form of meditation, but real form is turning the light inward. That is what it says. So, buddhi is something which enables you to see things clearly. But it should not be used to just see the external worlds clearly, because it will distract you. It will definitely make you a wise person, a very shrewd person, how to make more money, more, but then that will lead to more vrittis, more complications. You'll be a very wise person, but Swamiji says you'll be a wise fool. You are wise, worldly wise, but ultimately you are end up destroying yourself. Now, he says, Chitta the difficulty in our practice of yoga is this chitta cannot now be fully converted. If that had happened, then we would have been like Buddha. Every time we take a decision, it would be right. It will always lead to peace and harmony and happiness. But it doesn't happen. 2 past 12. So I think we are running short of time, but we'll just take a few minutes. So I'll just discuss this. Chitta manifest. Now, Swami Vivekananda, of course, it is based on the commentary. He says the mind stuff takes, just as we saw, there were three broad divisions: Rajas, Tamas, dull state, then Rajas, active state, and then Sattva, which is the calm state. And we discussed that. But the Chitta, again, there is another classification according to Patanjali, where he says, Patanjali, which says takes 5 forms. When you go to the vrittis, Chitta vrittis, the Chitta takes 5 forms. He has made it a little more specific. One is Kshipta, that is scattering. It's very easy to understand. Now, if you ask ask what state of mind you are, you say, oh, my mind is scattered. It's going here, going there, restless. In other words, it is restless. Sometimes if you ask, or if you analyze, we analyze ourselves, it assumes another state. It oscillates between different states. So Kshipta is scattering. Mudha means darkening. Means you are just incapable of thinking. Say you're not taken food, and so many problems, you're facing a lot of problems, and you just say, sometimes we feel that way, that I'm not just able to take any decision now. My mind is totally incapable of reacting. It is not scattering, but it is mood, darkening. Means there is some gloom, and in that gloom, you are unable to take a right decision. Then third is Vikshipta. Kshipta, that is scattering. Vikshipta is a good state of the mind. That is gathering all the scattered mind. That is how 5 different states are described. Vikshipta, V means opposite. Opposite of scattering. That means gathering. You gather all the mind. That is what you do after asana, pranayama. Then you come to pratyahara. Pratyahara is making the mind gather around one point. We read some good books, then we meditate on what we have read. That is gathering the mind more and more. We first, mind is scattered, then we read some good books like Bible, like Upanishads, like Gita, like any biography. So that restricts our mind. It becomes vikshipta, gathered, but around certain ideas, but still it is scattered. We are thinking of maybe Jesus Christ and all his exploits and all the teachings. It's not just focusing on the personality or one idea, but it's focusing on many ideas, but it is better than Kshipta. Because earlier the mind used to go to the Bible, it used to go to other things, it used to go to money, it used to go to any other, many engagements. So at least when you focus it on certain one topic or around that topic, it is known as Vikshipta. But Vikshipta, as opposed to Kshipta, is better than Kshipta because the scattering mind is stopped. Then the fourth state is Ekagra. Ekagrata word has come from that. Concentrated mind. It is one-pointed. First it has been gathered. There are less and less thoughts. Then you make it focused, one-pointed. And it is one-pointed. Ekagra is not concentrated. It is one-pointed. Then the last state or the highest state is Niruddha. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Nirodha, from Nirodha, Niruddha state has come. That means it is perfectly concentrated as a result of intense meditation. So, what Kshipta does, I'll briefly explain what it does, and next class we'll take it from here. The Kshipta scattering form is activity. So, what gives rise to activity? Our restless mind. It's very clear. If 100 thoughts come, you will do 100 actions, or at least 20 actions, because each one of these thoughts has a capacity to make you dance to its tune. So Kshipta, the result of Kshipta is activity. And its tendency, what happens if your mind is Kshipta? You can be in any one of these five states. But Kshipta will give rise to activity and correspondingly give rise to pleasure and pain. It may be pleasure sometimes. If you are doing good activity, it may give you pleasure, bad activity, pain. Then Mudha is, it does two things. If your mind or chitta is in the Mudha avastha or that state, it is dullness, but dullness is always not uh, passivity. Dullness in the sense it doesn't enable you to think clearly. So it can become, it can make you, there is a tendency to injure others. Thoughtlessness, a thoughtless person, a dull person doesn't mean that he will not act. He can be destructive. He's not constructive. Kshipta form, at least if he uses it properly, the active Rajasic person will do some good activity also. There is a chance. Of course, he may do bad things. But Mudha state, unfortunately, if the Chitta goes to the Mudha state, he will commit injury. Or he will be dull. He will do nothing, just sleep. The commentator says the third form is natural to the Devas and angels, and the first and second to demons. So if your mind, demons, of course, not in that sense, not the Puranic demons. So among human beings also there are demonic people of demonic nature. So if your mind is always Kshipta and Mudha, these two, it is oscillating between these two, then you can't expect any yoga from that person. So he says they are known as, it's natural to the, not to the devas that are angels, it's natural to demons, people of demonic nature. And people of angelic or who are like angels, the other three states will be manifest more. That is Vikshipta, gathering, or at least trying to gather, one pointed, Ekagra, and Niruddha, concentrated. That is classified as Devas. So Devas and Asuras, the angels and demons, these are just different characteristics of human beings. They're not personalities or beings somewhere like in the clouds or something like that. Though stories are built just, but it is a figurative way of telling that, of explaining that demonic people with demonic people of demonic nature will have Kshipta mind or a Mudha mind, and Vikshipta, Ekagra, and Niruddha will give rise to a noble personality. So that is why all these five states need to be understood. So we'll start from that, and then this almost we have come to the end. He says the Vikshipta state, the gathering form when it tries to meditate or tries to concentrate. That is only possible that he wants to lessen his thoughts. He has understood this restless mind is making me, of course, it is making me active and achieve certain things. But at certain stage, you are tired and you want to gather Ekagra, Vikshipta, when it struggles to find its own center, its fourth identity, its own purpose in life. Why am I doing all these activities? So where do I end? What is the purpose of that? When you start thinking, it tries to gather. First, it will try to reduce. That is why there's a simple living, high thinking. You reduce the unnecessary activities, then you are in a position to gather your mind. Ekagra and Niruddha will come later. Your higher yogas will come later. But Patanjali expects, after reading the sutra, at least you try to gather the mind when it tries to concentrate, and Niruddha, which brings us to Samadhi. Then we come to the third sutra, which we'll discuss. Tada drishtuhu swarupe avasthanam. At that time, means when you are in the state of yoga, chitta vritti nirodha, what happens when you reach that state? Now we are struggling to reach that state. When tada drishtu swarupe avasthanam, what happens? We'll discuss in the next class. So if there are some questions, we can have some quick questions. I'm sorry we have exceeded the time. Yeah.
That is, we started late also. But Maharaj, this was still explaining the second sutra. The third sutra will start next.
Next time, yeah. That is tada drishtu. You just make a note so that, because our classes are cancelled so often that I don't know where. But anyway, this discussion was necessary to
I will make.
recapitulate.
I will.
So we start from the third sutra directly now, hoping that most of them are regularly attending. If they are not, they can see the previous videos because we can't just go on recapitulating everything every time.
Agree. Next class.
So next class, you just remind that we are starting from the third sutra. So we have finished Swamiji's discussion at least on Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, Sutra number 2. Okay. Though it might have been, many things might have been repeated, but at least it has, it needs, these ideas need constant repetition, so that the ideas are firmly embedded in our mind. Yeah.
Sure.
So there are questions anyway? Yeah. There are questions on YouTube live.
Go ahead.
Self-love.
This also is the ninth chapter.
Yeah. So the question is, what is the role of self-love? I think it can have two connotations. This word self-love is a bit confusing. The question that is being asked is, what is the role of self-love? By that, if the questioner means, the one who has asked the question means love for the self, that is Purusha, then it is fine. If it is love for the Purusha, it's fine. But if it is love for the lower self, the ego self, then it is a problem because then it will create further complications. So self-love means if it is pure love for the self, the real self, which we have not yet identified with. We have not identified with that self, Purusha. If that love is there, then of course that is the greatest thing because that will enable you to declutter your mind because you will be so obsessed with the object of meditation. That is why they have this idea of Ishta. Ishta means that which I love most. I love many things, but I love my Ishta the most. So if you love somebody the most, you'll spend more time with him. That's the idea. So self-love in that case becomes a very useful tool of concentration. And definitely it will help you to reduce unnecessary thoughts. Because if you love 100 things, there is less chance that you can focus on the object that you really call Ishta. Ishta is not just verbally saying, oh, Thakur is my Ishta or Krishna is my Ishta or anybody. He should really be the Ishta. In that case, it is Ishta. Ishta is not just a word. It means that this is the thing that I cherish most in my life. And one should be honest. If I cherish something else, of course, you can focus your mind on that and you will get that. If money is my Ishta, it can be. Why not? It can be. Then it is better to be honest and say, and I'm aspiring for that, and you will get it because the nature of concentration is to get whatever you like. But if Purusha, self-love, if self is your only desirable thing in the world, Upanishads go on telling this again and again. It is the love of the self that manifests as love of the husband to the wife to the husband, to the children. It is there in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. It says, it is love of the self. Actually, we are loving our own self. But it is manifesting. Unfortunately, we don't know how to direct it. So it goes to this way, that way. And the love for the son also is the love for the self. You love the son because he is my son, not somebody's son. So the self comes into the picture. If you love money, it is only if you possess it. Because it is my money, my house, my son, my wife, my husband. So everywhere you see it is for the self. So self-love is already there. But if the self is the Ishta, then it is good. Acha, now this question requires a longer answer, so I think we can postpone it. It says, what is the meaning of Sthita Prajna according to Patanjali? Sthita Prajna is another way of expressing Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. A Sthita Prajna is one whose attention or whose focus is on the buddhi. That prajna means buddhi. Sthita prajna means one whose wisdom or buddhi is steady. Whose wisdom or buddhi is steady is known as man of steady wisdom. That is how Sthita prajna is translated. So it is nothing but it's the same as Patanjali when he says When you go to the ekagra or niruddha state, the vikshipta, slowly when you gather the mind, that is the state when you become the sthita prajna. So it is the same.
Fear of you of
So why there's another question which I think is not relevant to this topic, but anyway, why there is fear of death? So obviously, it is fear of death can be interpreted as fear of your wrong self-identity. So death is of the body. So if I feel I am the body, then there will be fear. If a person wants to know, a yogi or a person who wants to practice Vedanta, he is afraid of losing the self. That is, he says, anything that prevents me from reaching myself and finding my true nature puts fear in my mind. So the very idea for them, the other identities become a burden. That is why they renounce. They don't want. They fear the idea that they will not be able to realize their true identity, that they give up their false identity. Renunciation means that. They're not afraid of losing money, they're not afraid of losing anything in the world because they know these things are anyway temporary. So, fear of death is very often fear of physical death. There is something known as spiritual death. See, in the Upanishads, they say, in Gita, Sri Krishna says, if you ignore the Atman, you will be committing spiritual suicide. Physical suicide is getting rid of the body, but spiritual suicide, that death is different. So he says one kills oneself literally by not following the spiritual path. That is a higher. So fear of death, you should specify fear of which death. Normally, fear of death means fear of physical death. Okay. Any questions? John, Jason? So we'll conclude, or is there any question? If you have, you can just see on your.
No questions here, Maharaj. No
Okay.
questions, I think.
So if you have recorded, it's fine. Otherwise, it is there on YouTube live. So I can, it's automatically recorded.
No, ours is also there.
Yeah. So in case that link, I'll just share with the group.
Yes, share with me, Maharaj. Thank you.
Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Next weekend, that is Sunday, I'm going to South Africa. So I'll be away. So maybe the next last Sunday I'll not be there.